Hey, well, welcome everybody. Today is April 10th, 2022. Today we will be studying a lot of verses. We're going to hope we can get through 14 verses today. 24 verses today. So we're going to press forward and hopefully get through all of Acts 23 today. All right. Start out with a small review. Last week we went through Acts 23, 7 through 10. Paul testified of the hope and resurrection of the dead. If you remember that, and we talked about that was really why he was being tried, was the hope of the resurrection of the dead. Not because of necessarily Jesus, but because of this whole 1,000-year born again at the beginning of the 1,000 years for the Jews. We learned about the role of angels and spirits, right? And then we talked about the differences of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They disagree on the whole Jewish faith. And then the chief captain, when Paul was out speaking, what did the chief captain do? He dragged Paul back into the castle, right, for his own safety, because it just isn't safe out there with what the Jews were trying to pull him apart again. So that was the Acts 23, 7 through 10. So now we're back inside the castle with Paul. Okay, let's see. So Acts 23, 11. So after Paul was dragged back into the castle, and the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also in Rome." Now this whole Lord stood by, him and said, "Be of good cheer." This Lord stood by. It isn't talking about stood up. It's talking about stood by. And the Lord stood by any person only 2 times in all of Scripture. The other time was in 2 Timothy 4:17. If we turn to 2 Timothy 4:17 quickly, we'll see where, notwithstanding, this is Paul again who wrote 2 Timothy. "Notwithstanding, the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, that by me the preaching might be fully known, and that the Gentiles might hear, and I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion." Okay, so that stood by, or stood in this stood with in 2 Timothy 4:17. Okay, but this the crux of this verse is talking about Jesus. Telling Paul that for thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must ye now bear witness also at Rome. Jesus is giving instruction, but it's actually a reminder. This isn't like Jesus said, "Oh, so you completed that task. Now let's create a new one. Let's make a new one. Let's whatever a new one." No, it isn't. If you recall, back in Acts 9:15, this is what this verse is about. Acts 9:15. And this is on the road, right, where Saul's conversion was, when he was Saul. And Jesus said to him, "But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel." Okay? When Saul was recruited on the road back there to Damascus a long time ago, there were 3 things that he was going to have to do, 3 groups he was going to have to go talk to. Acts 23:11 is reminding Paul, you haven't done the last part. Okay? If we go, Paul was sent to testify of this gospel of the kingdom and the gospel of Christ, to 3 groups, and all 3 groups happened in Acts, but the last group hasn't happened yet. Jesus says, you got to go to Rome. Okay, so it isn't just a throw it in there. Well, let's send Paul, to Rome. No, it was the fact that back in Acts 9:15, he'd already given him the assignment. And he's just kind of nudging Paul, saying, remember, you got to get to this one too. Acts 18:9 through 10, Paul, I'm sorry, let's go to Acts 18:6. We have Acts 18:6, and when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment and said, your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From henceforth I will go to the Gentiles. So there he says, I'm going to go to the Gentiles. I'm going to talk to the Gentiles. That's one of the groups. And in Acts 18:9 through 10, the Lord reminds him. He comes and talks to him, kind of an encouragement. Yeah, you talk to the Jews. Now let's go talk to the Gentiles. He's like, group one down in Acts 18:6. The group two down is in this children of Israel in Acts 23:6, what we just experienced. Because in 23:6, he's talking to the spiritual leaders, okay? To the heads of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, to the Sanhedrin. Group two down. Now God is saying in 23:11, we got Jews done, we got Gentiles done. Now let's go and talk to the third group. Okay, pretty neat. Now, also to point out what gospel in Acts 9:15 and what gospel was being shared in Acts 18 and Acts 23. Which gospel has multiple groups? Not our gospel, not the gospel of God. Our gospel of God in Galatians 3:28 and Colossians 3:11, as you recall, I throw those out often, but those are to the all, to all. There's only one group in this gospel. So when Jesus is telling him, hey, you still have another group to go talk to or another people, he's saying, we're still in groups here. Right? We are not talking to all in the gospel of God. So he's saying throughout Acts, three groups, got to go talk to. And so this is not the gospel of God. This is the gospel of Christ. Now, we've read this a few times, but we don't read it often enough. What is the gospel of Christ? Romans 1:16 gives us an amazing definition of what the gospel of Christ is. And we're going to hear more than one group here. You're not going to hear I'll paraphrase the Galatians 3:28. You're not going to hear there's neither Jew nor Gentile, Hebrew nor free, bond nor let's see. Is there neither Jew nor Gentile, bond nor free, male nor female, for you're all one in Christ. Okay? Neither Jew nor Gentile. You're not going to hear that, neither Jew nor Gentile. You're not going to hear that. Here in Romans 1:16 it says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Well, what is the gospel of Christ? Paul's saying, I'm not ashamed that I taught it back here in Acts. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, or the Gentile. Okay? So, what we're going through here in Acts 23:11, what Christ in Acts 9:15 commanded Paul, go and testify, go and bear witness of me, to three groups. It couldn't have been the gospel of God. It just can't be the gospel of God. There aren't multiple groups. Okay. All right. So, moving on. Acts 23:12. Let me get back to my... And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. I like the word certain. We'll draw attention to that later. But certain of the Jews. Did it specifically? It wasn't just I don't know really which one. No, we know exactly which ones, the certain. But they banded together. Okay, this banded together only refers twice to men being banded together. If we read back in Mark 15:16, we understand what banded together was. Mark 15:16, and the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole band. Okay? So they called together the whole band, the whole group of them. So this is a banded together. This is a whole group of them. Thus, in Acts 23:12, when we're reading about it only the second time, technically they got the band back together. Kind of funny. Okay. Little Side joke there. Anyway, but this banded together is to get a bunch of group to be binding themselves together, just like you'd use with a band, with a rubber band or whatever else like that. Okay. Verse 23. And they called, let's see. 13. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, verse 13. I was going to say, that doesn't sound right. And they were more than 50 which had made this conspiracy. 40. Thank you. And they were more than 40 which made this conspiracy. A conspiracy is a combination, according to Webster's 1828 dictionary, which is what I exclusively use for definitions. It's a combination of men for an evil purpose. Okay? Now, that isn't to do bad. We understand the definition of evil versus bad. Evil is not of God. So they banded together, not necessarily to do something bad. They thought it was good to kill Paul because they thought he was, blasphemy, right? But they were bound together, and it wasn't something that was commanded of God. So they bound themselves together for an evil purpose. This conspiracy is a combination of men for an evil purpose. Okay? Acts 23:13 is the only place that conspiracy appears in the New Testament. It's the only conspiracy in the New Testament. Now, it happens 29 times in the Old Testament. But here, the conspiracy is, so what they're saying is this is the first evil that the Sadducees or the Pharisees were doing to bind themselves together. They're like, well, this isn't God's idea, but it's a pretty good idea. This isn't commanded in the law, but it's a pretty good idea. So they bound themselves into a conspiracy that's not of God. 23:14. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, the 40 of them, or more than 40, we have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now remember, these priests and the elders, there were like 70 of them. Remember, we read about that a couple different times. The Sanhedrin was a 70-member Jewish court, in essence. Okay, it was at Jerusalem, and it was instituted in Numbers 11:16 through 25. Okay, and so we read about that. So they're continuing and by going to the chief priests and the elders and present it to them, these 40 men are kind of asking for a little bit of forgiveness for what they're about to do, because they know this is not of God. It is a great curse. Now, to curse, we have our own definition of curse. It's wrong definition in the English language. Matthew 26:74 proves that curse is not a bad word. We think of it as a bad word. It will make sense out of this in Matthew 26:74. Then began he to curse and to swear. Well, if swearing is cursing and cursing is swearing, why didn't they say it once rather than twice? Okay? So he began to curse and to swear. So now we know that swearing is different than cursing. Now let's describe what Peter or what Paul, what the men here were binding themselves to, because they weren't binding themselves to a great swearing fest, right? They were binding themselves to a great curse. Okay? This curse is equal to, so you put curse equals work or works of a man. The work that you do, the work that you are doing on behalf of yourselves is technically called a curse. It's a physical activity, a physical work. It is not something of God. Okay? This curse is something that these men came up with by calling it a curse. They were acknowledging that this is not a work of God, this is a work of man. This is further explained in Galatians 3. We're going to go to Galatians 3, 10 through 13. It's interesting to understand, what are these guys binding themselves and what are we still under? we are still under the law. We're still under the works of the law, right? Everybody would agree. We're not in the gospel of God. Here's another proving point. We go to Galatians 3:10. We'll start there and we'll end in 13. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. Works of the law under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for thus the just shall live by faith. Now, Galatians is talking about a contradiction between the works and the faith, right? We know Galatians is the transition from works of the law to faith. So that's what he's talking about here. But then he reflects again in 12 and 13. And the law is not of faith. But the man that doeth them shall live in them. So if you're going to be sticking to the law, you're stuck to the law. You are under the curse. Verse 13. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree. So this whole curse, those Jews under the works of the law, physically, are under the curse or sin. Okay? They're under sin. Christ redeemed the Jews from the curse of the law. Christ redeemed them from the sin, being made a curse for them. In other words, Christ became physical sin. He became the curse. He became all the works that they did that were contrary, that were against the law, that they broke the law. He became that curse, the works. Okay? So when it says that we have bound ourselves under a great curse, they're saying we have conspired to do a work that is evil, that is still under the law, and that is really against the law, but we've bound ourselves to it. We bound ourselves to kill somebody. It's not of God, and it's not something spiritually, it's something physically. This helps us understand Galatians 3:10, that curse is a bad thing. It's sin. They, in essence, they're saying we bound ourselves to a physical sin. Okay?
Is that what the Jews basically why they cling to the law? Because they are under the curse? That's why they cannot see the resurrection as a viable...
I think that's right. I think it's also because the Jews are just selfish. They don't want to admit to any of this New Testament, because if they admit to this New Testament, and they admit to what Christ did, and they admit that Christ came to actually forgive all sins so they don't have to stay under the law, and if they would accept that, it would have never been offered then to us under the gospel of God. And they really don't want that. They really don't want anybody coming in a faith only. They're like, wait a minute. We have spent the last 3,000 years following every eating order. We have earned our place in the only people who are blessed by God. And they don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to have anything to do with the graft in, that 14 years where the Gentiles could become Jews. They could be baptized. They could be circumcised. They didn't have to be circumcised, gospel of the uncircumcision, but at the very beginning of that gospel, they had to. And they're just ticked off because for 2,000 years or thereabouts, they were the only favored ones. They were God's people. They were, and now you tell a Jew, well, now everybody can be saved through the gospel of God. You don't have to do it based on works. Ephesians 2:8 and 9. They're like, no, it can't be that easy. Wait a minute, that sounds like a cop-out. That's hypocrisy. We don't accept any of it, and they just turn away from it. So I think it's out of selfishness that they want to be the only ones being offered salvation. So, let's see. Let's see. So under the great curse, Acts 23:15. Now, therefore, ye with the council, so these 40 are trying to convince the council that they should allow this them to kill Paul. Okay? So, now therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief priest that he bring Paul down unto you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. and we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. Okay, so they just laid out their plot to the council. Okay, and when Paul, and verse 16, and when Paul's sister's son, I kind of think that's kind of funny, Paul's sister's sons, brothers, neighbors, in-laws, but somebody heard it, okay? And when Paul's sister's son heard about their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Now, where are we in this castle thing, right? We do this review every time. I think it's kind of fun. Here's the world. Here's where Israel is down here. Now there's a zoom in of Israel. We understand that Jerusalem is in tight there. Here's a picture of old Jerusalem. Okay? Here's the Temple Mount. So we're in between what was the temple and the fort or the castle, and we were in this area here, right? In the court. And so Paul is being held up here in the castle. Right? Okay? So in verse, was that 15? In verse 16 it says, and he went in and entered into the castle and told Paul. So the little boy or whatever, the sister's son, Paul's sister's son, went into the castle and told Paul. Verse 17, then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, bring this young man to the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. Now remember, this chief captain, this chief captain is Lysias. Remember the dude Lysias, okay? And Lysias, if you a reminder, just a brief, he was likely a Greek, but he bought his Roman citizenship, we believe, with his 25-year military service, okay? Now he also commanded, so this chief captain, he commanded 1,000 Roman soldiers stationed at the castle next to the Jerusalem temple. So the kid goes running into the castle and says, find the chief captain. We have some information to tell him. Okay, find this Lysias.
Now, who is Festus again? Lysias was the chief captain.
So Festus would be coming forward. He'd be one of the kings that he actually had to testify in front of, to give his defense in front of. Yep, maybe in 25-ish, something like that, Acts 25. Yep. So this certain thing. I love these words. I love folks. You all know I love focusing on these. So he says, bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. Okay? This certain is 231 times in Scripture. Here's a little side note for you. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But the word certain means to be easily procured. In other words, this kid had something very simple to tell the chief captain. Okay, it wasn't complex. It wasn't this big story. He says, hey, he hath a certain thing to tell him. This certainty means easily procured or easily gotten. This is the same word that is used many times in parables. Okay, so there was a certain man, there was a certain event, there was a certain time. Okay, this is a very simple idea, but it's a very specific idea. So the certainty means existing in fact and truth. So it's both factual and true, not doubtful. It means really existing. This certain does. So if we have certain in a parable, it means that we have something simple but factual that we are communicating through a parable. Well, what is a parable? A parable means easily procured or easily gotten. Par, if you're a golfer, you understand what par is. It means like, you should get this on the hole. You should get par. Okay? Now, if you get better than par, if you're a better golfer, then you get birdie. If you're a worse golfer, you get bogey, right? But if you get par, so the word parable or parable means to easily be gotten. And then what's the last part of parable? And able to be gotten. So it's easily, or that should be what you get. And so when we have a parable, It's something that should be easily processed, okay? And it's something with certainty in it. So Jesus taught, the word parable is used 18 times in the Old Testament, 45 in the New Testament. But it's interesting that parables happen in the Old Testament too. It wasn't just Jesus who taught in parables. That's a fallacy. Don't let anybody tell you that, okay? 18 times in the Old Testament. Jesus taught in parables to the Jewish people. Matthew 13:34, Mark 4:34, just to mark, and you can look up, pause the video if you need to. But Jesus didn't speak in parables to his disciples. That's the difference of parable versus not parable. Jesus never spoke in parables to his disciples. He wanted them to understand the depth of the story. Parables and whatever the word certain was used in parables, so I keep pointing to certain, I don't really mean to. The parables was, hey, this is stuff that is surfacey. I'm going to tell the multitudes, I'm going to tell the Pharisees, the Sadducees, whoever else like that, because they're not going to understand the depth of what I'm telling the disciples. And he says specifically, he never talks to them. Again, Matthew 13, 10 through 15, Jesus explains, Matthew 13, 10 through 15, that he's not going to speak to the disciples in parables. He's going to tell them the all. But the parables, even with certain information in them, specific and true, not made up stories. A parable is not a made up story. Don't let anybody tell you that. That's not true. There were certainties within that. It's just that it's more easily palatable. It's more easily understood in a parable form that he told the multitudes. He told his disciples the depth. Okay? So
when it's a certain man, an actual certain...
A certain man means an actual... And in many parables, he even uses the term, and it came to pass. Okay? If you say, and it came to pass, you aren't just making it up. It actually happened. Remember last Thursday when it happened? That thing, okay, so the parable is not, again, I'll repeat it again. Parable has nothing to do with a story. It's not something that Jesus made up. It's something that Jesus made more easily understandable for the multitudes, okay? So this certain, he had a certain piece of information. Now we're back off of the side note. He had a certain existing in fact and truth, okay? So the kid goes right in there, says, I've got some information, Acts 23:18. So, one of the centurions, so the centurion took him, okay? So he took him and brought him to the chief captain, to Lysias, and said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him, and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. Okay? Then the chief captain, verse 19, then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked him, what is it that thou hast to tell me? Verse 20, and he said, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire something of him more perfectly. Verse 21. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath. Little boy calls it an oath. We know it's a curse, right? That they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. In other words, they just want you to be part of the story. You don't need to kill Paul. You just need to get Paul in the right place. The centurion just telling the centurion, the chief priest. Okay? Verse 22. So the chief captain then let the young man depart and charged him, see thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things unto me. Verse 23. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night. So, chief captain says, get together 200 guys. I like how the Bible defines itself and defines words for us. When he said, make ready 200 soldiers. Well, who had the authority to round up at their command 200 soldiers? One centurion? No. You'd have to have 2 centurions. Isn't it kind of funny? They said, call them to get 2 centurions. So you call your 100 guys. You call your 100 guys. Now we got 200 guys. Okay, that's what centurion is, 100. Okay, it's just I just love the fact that it reaffirms what we already knew. Okay, and then this third, they want to go to Caesarea. Okay, this Caesarea. Caesarea. So Caesarea, it's approximately, so from where we're located, this Caesarea is up here. Where they are right now is Jerusalem, down here. Okay? So they're going to make this trip, 200 dudes, some horses, some whatever else like that, about 75 miles. Okay? They're going to take a trip over this way a little bit, and then they're going to come up. Okay? Now, Herod the Great was the one who built Caesarea. Okay? He built it around, let's see, between 22 BC and 10 BC, according to the authority. It used to be called Strato's Tower. I could not find much on Strato's Tower, but that's what Caesarea used to be called. Okay? Now, the reason why they're doing all this, why would they flee Jerusalem? I thought Jerusalem was the center of everything. Well, we're not told everything in Scripture. We have to understand some of this from history. And in 6 AD, Judea, this area here, became a province of Rome. So this province of Rome in 6 AD. But when that happened, Caesarea replaced Jerusalem as its civilian or military capital. Thus, all the governors and everything powerful of the Romans was here. Not here. Now, for 2,000 years, this was the place. So when he said, hey, we're getting out of here to get 200 dudes, we got a riot started, we're going to go back to our stronghold. Okay? Herod Agrippa, or Herod II, or Agrippa I, the grandson of Herod the Great's throne was here, okay, in Caesarea. This is where Herod the Great, and thus Herod Agrippa, that's where his throne was. We're gonna read about Agrippa I is what we'll read about here, and we read about him back in Acts 12. He actually died there, but anyway, on the throne in 44 AD. But Peter first entered a Gentile home in Caesarea. So the first place when Peter says, hey, I'm not clean, he went into the centurion's home in Caesarea. Okay, Philip, the one who did miracles and preached Christ before Paul ever preached Christ, lived in Caesarea. So Caesarea is it's about 120,000 people, thereabouts, okay, at this time. This is a big deal. Probably bigger than Jerusalem, maybe at that time. I don't know how big Jerusalem was at that time, but Caesarea, big deal, okay? So this Caesarea looks like this. So we have a big one of those hippodromes, okay? We've got, and we'll show a video later after the deal, but we've got where the castle was and where the palace was. And so it's a very highly developed area. And this is a current picture, as of probably 5 years, 10 years ago. I don't know. I got it off the internet, off of Medane Project, whatever. But this Caesarea is no small place. This is the center of the Roman province. So the Governor Felix, was here. Okay, beautiful. I mean, with seating and things like that, and they think that's where Agrippa I died, there in that giving a speech there. But anyway, so Acts 23:23. I think we'll end pretty soon here. And he called unto him the 2 centurions, make ready 200 soldiers, go to Caesarea. Right? 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and they're going to leave at the 3rd hour of the night. Okay, third hour of the night. The days, as we understand the time, the new Jewish day begins at 6 p.m. Okay, then the third hour of the night is 9 p.m. So they left at 9 o'clock at night. I mean, in a haste. Okay, third hour of the night. I think we can do it a couple more. So this is the chief captain ordering the 2 centurions and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. Okay. We're going to hear that Paul's going to, or the chief captain is going to write a letter. He's going to present that letter, but I think we'll do that for the next video. So, okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Do the video.